markets are closed, but the business stories are just heating up. Hello, I'm Mai Rodriguez. Catch up with us on Business Brief. Most Asian equity markets struggle on Friday as U.S. President Donald Trump's deadline for trade deals looms next week. This is despite record highs for Wall Street overnight. Trump recently announced that he will start sending out letters to trade partners with their tariff rates as deals remain elusive ahead of the July 9 deadline. He expects several more agreements after reaching a deal with Vietnam on Wednesday. A mixed picture dominates the Asian markets, with South Korea's Kospi falling the most at nearly 2%. China's Shanghai Composite, meanwhile, rises the most at 0.8%. In the currency markets, the U.S. dollar depreciates against the Japanese yen, South Korean won, Singapore dollar, and Thai baht, but is flat against the Hong Kong dollar with a downward bias. The Australian dollar, meanwhile, appreciates against the greenback. In commodities and crypto, gold prices rise by 0.2%. However, a sea of red dominates the oil markets and cryptocurrency space after falling by less than 1%. A grand signing at the White House of President Donald Trump's so-called One Big Beautiful Bill. Trump has invited all members of the U.S. House of Representatives and the Senate as he signs the tax cut and spending bill this Friday, just in time for the July 4 Independence Day holiday. With the measure passed, Trump says the people of the United States of America will be richer, safer, and prouder than ever before. The legislation cleared its final hurdle on Thursday, with the House narrowly passing it by a 218 to 214 vote.
I think a lot of the estimations about what this legislation would do in a negative manner to communities in my state or any other are far overblown. I can tell you that this bill is going to be a great thing for everybody around the country, my constituents especially. What's good for Louisiana is good for America. We've got great tax policy here. I think they're going to feel this pretty quickly. Wages will rise. I think household income will go up. I think the job participation rate will increase dramatically. I think unemployment will be low.
Every Democrat in Congress voted against the bill, saying it will only benefit the wealthy while leaving millions uninsured. The spending cuts largely come from Medicaid, the health program that covers 71 million low-income Americans. President Donald Trump offers seasonal farm workers a path to stay in the U.S. on the condition that their employers vouch for them. While reasserting a tough immigration stance, he hinted at supporting flexibility for migrants working in the agriculture and tourism sector.
And we're working on legislation right now. Susie, right? We're working on legislation right now where farmers, look, they know better. They work with them for years. You had cases where, not here, but just even over the years, where people have worked for on a farm for 14, 15 years, and they get thrown out pretty viciously, and we can't do it. We got to work with the farmers and people that have hotels and leisure properties too. We're going to work with them, and we're going to work very strong and smart, and we're going to put you in charge. We're going to make you responsible.
The Commission on Audit declines a request to audit Meralco's financial records for now. The COA explains this is due to manpower limitations and other ongoing priorities. In a letter to the National Association of Electricity Consumers for Reforms Incorporated, or NASECOR, it says it is open to conducting what it calls a cyclical audit for 2023 and 2024, but not until the second half of next year. NASECOR had previously called for a comprehensive audit of Meralco. It also urges the COA to publish its findings. Asia's most influential business leaders are gathering in Manila, and the Philippines is making a play for strategic relevance. After more than a decade, the country is hosting the 14th Asian Business Summit, bringing together top executives from 12 economies to strengthen regional ties amid growing global fragmentation. In a courtesy call at Malacanang, President Marcos called for deeper multilateral cooperation to shore up economic stability and drive sustainable growth. He also unveiled new partnerships in clean energy and future-ready industries aimed at attracting long-term investments and creating high-quality jobs for Filipinos. The summit is led by the Philippines-Japan Economic Cooperation Committee and Japan's Business Federation, as Manila and Tokyo position themselves as engines of resilience in Asia's next chapter. The Department of Finance wants to slap taxes on online gambling and crack down on unchecked access to digital betting platforms. The bigger picture, a growing social risk. Filipinos, including young adults, are facing rising addiction to online gambling, and lawmakers are sounding the alarm. Finance Secretary Ralph Recto is studying limits on cash-ins and playing time and wants to require warning labels on gambling risks similar to cigarettes. He's also calling for a total ban on government officials participating in any form of gambling, online or offline. We're taking a short break. More business stories are up next. You're watching Business Brief. You're back on Business Brief. After 4 straight months of cooling, Philippine inflation edged up in June, although still under market expectations. We have more details from Sujin Kim.
Mai inflation in the Philippines accelerated slightly to 1.4% in June from 1.3% in May, ending a 4-month streak of decline. While overall inflation remains low compared to previous years, surging costs in electricity and education services drove the increase, suggesting household budgets are far from relieved. Metro Manila saw a sharper rise, with inflation accelerating to 2.6% from 1.7%, primarily due to higher housing and utility costs. By contrast, areas outside the capital experienced a slight slowdown to 1.1% thanks to flat food prices. Core inflation, which strips out volatile food and energy items, stayed put at 2.2% for the 4th straight month. Food inflation continued to plunge to just 0.1%, led by a record negative 14.3% drop in rice prices, the sharpest since 1995. This historic deflation, DepDev says, was driven by government interventions which temporarily offset rising costs in other essentials like meat, particularly pork, fish, particularly alumahan, cooking oil, and fruits, particularly mangoes. For the poorest 30% of Filipino households, inflation turned negative at negative 0.4%, a rare breather due to declines in prices of rice, corn, vegetables, and sugar. The central bank expects inflation to remain below the 2% target for most of 2025, but warns of emerging threats including geopolitical conflicts in the Middle East, oil price spikes, and U.S. trade policy uncertainty. The BSP now signals that a more accommodative monetary policy stance is warranted amid slowing global demand and domestic growth. The government touts interventions like the swine industry recovery project, fuel discounts for public transport, and the upcoming Onion Research Center as safeguards against future price spikes. But experts warn that climate shocks, volatile commodity markets, and structural supply gaps could derail these gains. And those are latest updates from Quezon City. Back to you, Mai.
Thank you for that report, Sujin Kim from the PSA office in Quezon City. Frederick Go, Special Assistant to the President for Investment and Economic Affairs, welcomes the latest inflation data. Go says it reflects the government's continued efforts to keep costs stable, especially for the most vulnerable sectors. He adds the government has measures to manage risks and cushion against external shocks. The Makati Business Club also welcomes the latest inflation figure on BNC's Business 360. MBC Executive Director Apa Ongpin lauds the Marcos administration's efforts in keeping inflation in check. This despite various disruptions in the geopolitical scene.
This is an excellent performance by the economic cluster. Inflation is particularly difficult to tame after an election because, you know, all sorts of money enters the system, right?
A lot.
You know, they did it. They were able to control the price of rice in particular. They were able to lower food prices in other sectors and basic goods. And this is a huge effort. This is not just,
It's not just lip service.
Not
This
just
is
lip
action,
service.
yeah.
It's action. And hats off to them.
Okay.
We really think this is the central job of these guys, because inflation really hits the poor. And controlling inflation is much, much better than raising wages.
Del Monte Philippines is not part of the bankruptcy filed by Del Monte Foods Holdings Limited in the U.S. That clarification made by Del Monte Pacific Limited. It adds that its subsidiary, Del Monte Philippines, with its Asian and international businesses, continue to perform well with resilient consumer demand, supported by a strong and stable supply chain. A March financial statement shows that Del Monte's U.S., Canada, and Mexico sales posted an operating loss of over $7 million over the 3-month period ending last January 31. The government is moving to bring down healthcare costs. 19 more life-saving and maintenance drugs are now VAT exempt. BIR Chief Romeo Lumagi says this is part of a broader push to make treatment more affordable, especially for Filipinos battling high-cost diseases. The new list includes medicines for cancer, diabetes, hypertension, and mental illness, diseases that drive both poverty and public health costs. This VAT relief is backed by the Train and Create laws and based on recommendations from the Food and Drug Administration. The BIR is now monitoring pharmacies to ensure the benefits reach consumers and is urging the public to report overpricing or non-compliance. The big picture, with out-of-pocket spending still making up half of healthcare costs in the Philippines, this move is a small but crucial step toward access to universal healthcare. We're taking another short break. More business stories coming up next. You're watching Business Brief. Lawmakers in Bolivia turned violent during a debate on controversial lithium contracts with Chinese and Russian firms. Contracts are expected to bring in investments worth $2 billion. But a Bolivian court suspended the 2 extraction deals due to legal challenges. Indigenous groups opposed the deal, citing serious environmental impacts and lack of proper consultation. Bolivia possesses the world's largest lithium reserves, estimated at 23 million tons. A Filipino film about the country's waters just made waves halfway across the world. Food delivery, fresh from the West Philippine Sea, took home the Tides of Change Award under the Best Festival category at the 2025 Dock Edge Festival in New Zealand. The documentary by Baby Ruth Villarama shines a spotlight on the valiant efforts of Filipino fishermen, the Coast Guard, and the Navy to deliver desperately needed food and aid to communities, all while defending their livelihoods and national sovereignty in the contested waters. Produced by Voyage Studios, the documentary had its world premiere in Auckland last June 30th as part of the Academy Award qualifying film fests. Philippine shares suffer a red Friday after inflation accelerates to 1.4%. The PSE index ended lower by more than 1% to close at 63.95, finishing the day as the second worst performer in Asia. All of the sectoral indices ended in the red, with property falling the most at more than 2%. Decliners outpaced advancers 111 to 85. Total value turnover reached 6.6 billion pesos. Week on week, the PSEI fell by nearly 0.2%. Majority of the day's most active stocks ended in the red, with DigiPlus falling the most at more than 23%. Meanwhile, the foreign exchange market, the peso is currently trading at 56.51 against the greenback, depreciating from the previous close of 56.25. And that's a wrap for today's Business Brief. I'm Mai Rodriguez. Join us again next week as we bring you the stories that help you plan your next big, bold moves in business, only here on the Bilyonaryo News Channel. Have a great weekend.